The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame. Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I am Raygan Kelly, and I am joined this week by one very cool co-host,
Laura Nash.
And this week we are talking about the brand new game from publisher Annapurna and developer
Daniel Benmergui.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Argentinian developer. It's not spelled how it sounds. Apologies to Daniel.
Yes, and we did do our best effort to look up the game. So we actually had early codes for this game. So it is harder than normal to get pronunciation guides for developers' names.
This is true.
We are using the best we know of and similar names pronunciation guides. So apologies to Daniel if we have mispronounced your name. We tried. We did. We really did.
I gave it a go. Or Laura did. Thank you, Laura. So this week we are talking about Storyteller, which is a game that, you know, if that sounds familiar to you, it's because this game has been in and out of development for over 15 years. This developer began work on prototypes that became this game all the way back in 2009. And a sort of early version of this game was shown off at IGF, the Independent Games Festival, and won the Nuovo Award, which is a pretty prestigious award for new developers. In 2012, this is a game that was like getting a lot of press in its earliest versions, like 15 years ago. And it was then in and out of development hell. The developer has talked about that process a little bit. In fact, he has a talk that he gave through something called Fuck Up Nights, which I had never heard of before this and only turned up in a Google search, but where he talked about the experience of this game getting a lot of attention and press and being hotly anticipated by the sort of independent games crowd, and then hitting some sort of a wall with it. And, you know, ending up like living back with his mom and not being able to get the game out. He worked on other projects elsewhere in the industry. And finally, it appears that sometime in the last couple of years, he returned to this early project and finally polished it off. And it has brand new art. Its original art was this, oh God, in kind of cringe pixel art.
Rough. Yeah,
it was pretty bad.
It was rough. Yeah.
But the new art looks gorgeous. I'm assuming that Annapurna helped sort of punt this thing over the finish line. And so here we have it today.
Yeah, the art's got this kind of sticker book quality in it, that it's all illustrated. But the idea is that you are putting together almost a comic book of panels where you choose the background of the scene, you choose the players, and that combination plus the order you put them in will radically change the story. There's a goal at the top, like the Queen marries, and you must create a story in which that happens. The characters might not want to do that, so you might need to reorder until they do want to do that. It's a very, like, it's one of those fidgety puzzle games where like things feel very tactile and you're just kind of moving things around. I think the art particularly makes it feel a lot more fun to play stuff than what the old art would have looked like, which would have been fine, but a lot less immersive in that way.
Yeah, let me describe the presentation a little bit. So, you know, it all takes place in a book. So, you know, you boot up the game, you get this large, beautifully 3D rendered book with Storyteller on the cover. And when you open it up, each page is sort of a double page spread that has a 3 or 6 or 8 panel comic on it. And your job is, and then at the bottom of the page is a panel or a sort of selection of things you can drag up onto the empty comic panels. So there'll be things like different frames or sort of backgrounds. Usually you'll have 2 or 3 or 4 different backgrounds that you can choose from, each of which kind of implies a certain event occurring.
Those be labeled marriage or wedding, death, witness.
Yeah, day, night, um, affair, things like that. And each of them has a slots within it where you can place characters. So you'll also get a selection of characters, and there'll be things like John, Mina, and Dracula, or king, queen, maid, knight, like archetypes, basically. Some of them are like very obvious specific archetypes named after characters from famous stories, but for the most part, they're pretty generic, like king and queen. And even
Except
some
for all of the dwarves who have incredibly specific names.
That is very funny. There's a bunch of them with dwarves that, yeah, I don't know what the deal is with the dwarves, but they are very funny. But then within the sort of setup, you're trying to make a particular thing happen. So as Laura mentioned, each page has a title at the top, and that's your goal. And the goal, I'm just going from, like, for example, a screenshot here. With the title as, I'm actually not even sure this one's included in the game. I think this one might be like just a screenshot on the press kit, but it says Deadly Sunbath, and you have a choice of day and night, and you have characters Dracula, John, and Mina. And you can decide, okay, it's nighttime. Do I have Dracula and John? Do I have Dracula on his own? Do I have just Mina and Dracula, whomever? And then, daytime, what happens? So you get to slot characters into various different roles within the panels. And then the order that happens in, what happens first and second and third, it creates a story that plays out. So what's really clever about this is that, for example, maybe in that Dracula example, the final panel has John and Mina out in the sun. But then if you add a panel and maybe they're just looking at each other or kissing or something, but if you add a panel before that where Dracula bites John, then that means now in that final panel, he's a vampire, which means that he's dying in the sun instead of kissing Mina or whatever. So the order of things in the panels have this sort of cascade effect. Things that happen earlier in the comic have natural story consequences that happen later in the comic. And it's very accessible. It's very sort of intuitive and natural. And everything, as a kind of interface for creating these little miniature stories, it's very natural. It really works.
And this is immediate. For folks who've played Framed or Framed 2, those games the characters would almost get stuck at times, like you were putting all the panels in the right order, but there would be times where you got the character stuck in a panel. That's not going to happen here. Every single panel refreshes every time you make any change. They called it a continuity simulator in the dev notes.
That's a really good phrase. Yeah.
Which I was like, I need to remember that for the recording, because it helps. You're aiming for a plot that fulfills the answer, but you might come up with another side plot that makes sense.
Yeah. And it does a good job of simulating different potential approaches. So, there might be like one very obvious way to achieve a particular goal, but sometimes if you want to mess around, there will be alternate ways to achieve the same goal, or alternate ways to do something that produces a goofy effect that might be amusing. And some of the puzzles will give you sort of bonus objectives. So like things like, maybe the end goal of a particular storyline is that a character commits suicide, but it's two different characters that could commit suicide. And you might have the first one and then a bonus objective for the second one. It's not exactly like extra points, but it's kind of hinting to you like, hey, you could try multiple different approaches here, and gives you a little bit of an extra stretch or challenge to try and find a different layout that would create different stories.
For example, one of them on the demo is Story of a Tragedy, where in the first panel, you can have two people marry. In the second panel, she meets a different dude who she rejects because she is married to someone else who's mad. And in the third panel, the tragedy can be that that man kills her husband, tragedy. Or you can have lovers who someone dies and it's already a tragedy in two panels. So you don't have to use all the panels. You don't have to use all the characters, but a lot of it is an experimentation engine, and how much fun you have playing with your paper dolls is kind of what this game is. So you can this is the type of puzzle where I would solve it immediately, or I would get one revision, or I would get stuck for a day. There was no in between. There's one puzzle I still haven't solved, which is embarrassing. 51 out of 52.
That was very frustrating. So actually, Laura and I, both got very near the end of this game, which, if I recall correctly, there are like 12 chapters, and each chapter has 4 puzzles in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that if you complete all of them, it unlocks some kind of final chapter, because there's kind of a locked final page at the end and a thing that gives you a tally. And Laura and I both got down to the end and realized that we were both completely stuck on one of the final set of puzzles. And I'm basically just going to have to wait.
Solving bonus puzzles does not get you any closer.
No.
You must complete every single one of the base puzzles. There's no built-in hint system.
Yeah. So I didn't wish there was a hint system on any of them except for basically like 2 of the final puzzles, and one of them you figured out. So thank you, Laura. You're my outboard brain once again.
Hey.
But like this final one, like we were both, I mean, I'm very eager to see, like, 3 days from now when this has been out for a while and like YouTubers have done their playthroughs or whatever, like I'm going to go and look and find some obvious solution to that puzzle that's going to make me smack myself in the face. But like, I don't know what's behind that kind of locked door at the end of the book, because we were both stuck on this one damn puzzle. But it was overall, I thought, actually kind of easy. Like my take on the puzzles here, overall, I think the presentation here is great. I was really impressed with it from a sort of like technical level and an artistic level. It's beautiful. It's fun to play around with. But as a puzzle game, Laura kind of already mentioned it was like either you get it or you don't. And I kind of felt that way about it. It felt a little bit to me like the first like 8 to 9 chapters out of 12 were all basically gimmies. Like you could look at them, at least I looked at them and kind of immediately knew what I needed to do. And so like some of the fun was like, well, I got it right. I did the thing. Maybe I mess around with it a little bit to see like what weird stuff I could make happen. But I didn't do a ton of that because I was still kind of making forward progress and kind of going through the game. I would stop and try to do extra stuff on the things that had bonus objectives, but that was really only like 1 or 2 in each chapter. And so overall, I felt like it was too easy. Like I would have liked a lot more of the bonus objectives. I would have liked a lot more hidden stuff. I know there is hidden stuff that I didn't get because there are like 12 or 15 achievements and I only got like 2 or 3 of them. So I know there's like more hidden fun little like discoveries for like different arrangements of the story, but I don't know. I didn't find it very satisfying as a puzzle. I found it pretty interesting and cute and fun to play around with, but like more like as like a weird toy or like, story building simulator, which is a cool thing to have rather than as a puzzle. It just doesn't feel puzzly to me.
This is not the game. This game took a long time to come out. I'm not asking for anyone to make this version of the game. But what I wanted at the end of this was almost a sandbox version where I could make challenges.
Yeah, maybe that exists past that locked door. I don't know.
Maybe.
But
again, we didn't play that far. But what I did find fun on a different level were, if you like classic literature, there's a lot of jokes about, like, make Hamlet, like, do a Machiavelli thing. Like, there's a early achievement for replicating the plot of the book The Sorrows of Young Werther.
I got that one too, and I don't actually know that book. So
the first time you approach one of the mysteries of like a detective and solving a case, I don't remember if it's the music from the Edward Gorey Masterpiece introduction for Masterpiece Mystery or Hitchcock, the Hitchcock Presents music. I think they use both in that chapter, which made me then think, oh, wait, were there musical references in all of the other chapters that I wasn't paying attention to? Like, were they playing the Sleeping Beauty suite when they were doing the Sleeping Beauty stuff? I don't know. The few references I caught made me think there were more. And I had fun when they don't hit you over the head with it, but it is fun at times to reproduce. Like at times this will also bite you because you're trying to actually show all of the plot of Hamlet, and there's only 8 panels. But those bits were like added a bit of charm to it. Like the puzzles were easy, but it would be like, oh, it's a puzzle where like I can't figure it out. The title is Salome. Let me look up the plot of Oscar Wilde's Salome to see if I'm missing something. Oh, I am. Okay, go. Like, it's not like that solved the puzzle, but it did kind of tell me some order of operations stuff. Like, it's clever, but your mileage may vary, right? And it's not, the writing is minimal, and the puzzles don't necessarily have continuity. So it's not as if you solve one page and then you've unlocked something for the next group of characters. It's a completely different puzzle. There's no sequential. Again, maybe there is after the. If you
I
can
don't
get
think so. Yeah,
the Duke to shoot the detective, let us know.
Damn it! Yeah, that getting the Duke to shoot the detective is the one that we were all like. There's a puzzle very near the end where the requirement is something like the Duke shoots the detective to avoid going to prison, and try as hard as I might, I could not figure out any way to get the Duke to shoot the detective. Every time he would just like hide his gun behind his back or whatever. So like, hey, if you figured that out and you're hearing the sound of my voice and it's not like, 10 weeks after we release this episode, hey, hit us up. Let us know. I need it.
Yeah. It does have the feeling of like endless chapters, like endless DLC could happen in this game. Like it's got that like mobile feel, like, and for folks who are new listeners, that is not an insult because Laura loves mobile puzzle games, but it's got that kind of like endlessly updatable feel to it.
I agree. And if I'm honest, like, I think that 12 chapters, like, I'm not one who usually says, like, this game is too short. I spent about 4.5 hours getting through this, and it felt like about the right amount.
I spent 2.5.
Yeah, well, of course you did, Laura. You're so smart. God damn it.
No, it's again, it's just, I also probably wasn't playing with some of the stuff as much as you were. So
no, I think you just got stuck less than I did, Laura. You
also have children, and I have no responsibility.
I mean, that's my excuse for everything now is that I have children and they interrupt me, and I have no. Yeah. Anyway, I'm out of excuses. I just didn't. I don't know the story of Salome, and I had to look that shit up too. But like overall, I had a lot of fun playing this. But I feel like it could use again 4.5 hours, but still I feel like it could use more, like 12 sets of 4 of these puzzles, especially towards the beginning of the game when a puzzle was taking me like no time at all. A lot of that 4 hours was me sitting there stuck, or. And
I would just, you can also just move on to the next puzzle, which is
yes. Yeah. Well, you can move on to the next set of puzzle within the set of 4. Each time, you have a set of 4 puzzles. You have to solve all 4 before you move on to the next chapter. And the fact that there's no hint system, like, again, easy stuff early on, so no issue there. And it was really only when we got to the last 2 chapters that I started getting stuck on anything at all. I wanted more challenge out of it towards the end, and I also wanted more options. Like a lot of these things give you like 2 or 3 different, different panels and 3 characters, and that's about it. And I'm like, I want the like. I want the DLC version of this. I want the version that like, go wild. Give me a puzzle that gives me like 10 different possible story options. Give me something that's like, I got to set up with really bizarre options.
Yeah. I don't want 2 things per panel. I want like 4 or 5. I want to play with I want to play with my paper dolls more in each panel. It's not necessarily that I want new engines or I want new books. I want new challenges within the system. Thing I meant to say at the beginning, yes, you can make almost all the love stories gay. If you can't make a love story gay, it's because there is a character in the title that must do a thing, and there's only so many people in the world. But if that is a thing, you're like, I want to experiment. The game does not force you to make straight people be straight.
Except the
also
king for
doesn't
some reason.
penalize you for
Totally
it.
straight. Not interested in dudes.
The king actually is the only one who's like, no, any woman I will hook up with, but not the knight.
Not the dudes.
And it's a little woman symbol.
Yeah.
Is what he does, staring at the knight.
So, let's see. So here's a question that I feel a little bad asking, but like, why did this? I mean, like, okay, yes, he talked about like having kind of hit some kind of a development wall or being in development hell, kind of going back to the drawing board, coming back to this years later. But like, did this feel to you like a 2012 game, or did this feel to you like a 2023 game? Like, where, like, did this like did this feel like a game that had been in development for years? Like, I felt kind of weird about it.
Well, for me, it was more like okay, so why now?
Right.
Other than it's done.
I have one theory about this, which is that, like, we've talked before about how Annapurna's whole business model with their indie game publishing seems to be finding semi-developed projects,
getting them past the finish line.
Yeah, and giving and pouring money into them to get them past the finish line. And maybe they're running out of those, and they're going back and looking at these games from 2012 that never came out, right?
I mean,
but like,
love a vintage 2012 game. Like, we love those. But
like, this feels like a 2012 game to me. Apart from the art, which is gorgeous and feels very modern, the like game design here feels very 2012 to me. Like, we talked a minute ago about Framed, and like, this is really 2014. Framed was clearly inspired by this. And you know, this is something that's happening a lot. We were just talking on the Discord about apparently Cart Life, a game that also came out in like 2012 or 2014 and gained a huge amount of like notoriety and had a big impact on the indie game scene back then, is getting like a modern updated re-release with the with the involvement of the developer and the new team of like indie indie devs kind of working on bringing it back out and like porting it to a new engine or what have you. Like, this is a thing that's been happening lately, but this feels to me like Annapurna doing the Annapurna thing again, where they find a distressed but critically well-regarded indie project and pour some money on it and see what happens. And in general, that has had a lot of mixed results. Like, we talked about this before with things like what was that horrible time loop game called?
12 minutes.
Oh, God, 12 minutes. Shoot me in the freaking head. 12 minutes.
That was a game that I was kind of excited to play. Didn't play it for the first 24 hours. Saw the reactions from the podcast and said, I'm not falling on this sword. And waltzed off into the woods like, oh, sorry, the game's bad. I'm not going to play it.
I honestly don't know whether that was the right choice or the wrong choice, because I don't know if I'd trade my like gobsmacked anger experience. Like, no game has made me so baffled and furious than 12 minutes has in years. I can't think of anything else that's give like such a visceral, bone deep reaction. But like, not a good one. But like Annapurna hasn't had a great track record lately. Like, early on, I think we thought of Annapurna as like gold standard. Like,
we said that.
Yeah.
I just want to go in the back in the times. I think we said Annapurna, everything they do is gold. Like,
and this, like, but like, then they've had a string of real stinkers, which are them following their model, and it doesn't always land, because sometimes those games that were like distressed indie projects didn't come out because they were bad or something.
And also, they released Stray this year and made just hand over fist.
And then Stray's amazing. Stray was fantastic. And so, like, I can't say that, but like, this is and I don't think actually Stray really fits that model. Like, I don't know exactly what the development story of Stray was, but it was not some like lost in development hell, well reviewed indie thing from whatever. But like,
they're when you go down to the bottom of their games list, it is What Remains of Edith Finch, Flower, Gora Gora, Gone Home, Donut County, Florence. Great. Don't Know Ashen, Outer Wilds, re-releasing Journey, Telling Lies, Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Great.
And then, like, the next one we cover is I Am Dead.
I Am Dead was not good. It was honestly, I thought it was like we hemmed and hawed on the episode, and it had its
not
points.
fun to look for your keys.
Thank you, Laura. It was not fun to look for your keys in that game. And then what else did we cover? Obviously the 12 minutes, and I feel like there's some others that I'm forgetting.
We didn't end up doing Maquette because I heard mixed stuff.
Oh yeah, Maquette, another one. Like
I played
look at that,
5
but it got
minutes
very
of
poor
Artful
reviews.
Escape and was like, we're not going to cover this.
Escape did not seem interesting to me at all. And so like they had like a real string of winners, and then they had a real string of what seemed like not winners.
I do like Pathless. Just for folks who were
I actually never played Pathless.
Pathless
so
Erasure. Pathless is fun.
Pathless, I'm sure, is great. This feels like a real mid to me. I don't know if this is like the beginning of the upswing or something. But like this is like, ain't no Outer Wilds, but it's also like pretty decent. I thought this was fine. I have some issues with it. It feels a little 2012.
Thank you for the codes.
Thank you for the codes. Annapurna, please don't block us.
Please don't blacklist us.
We love you in general.
You can look in the back. I have it Sayonara Wild Hearts Tarot deck. I've got the bomber jacket from it.
Oh man.
I didn't buy the official bomber jacket. I bought an Etsy bomber jacket. So I guess it's not like telling Etsy telling Annapurna rip-off merch is not a good
on balance. I think Annapurna has one of the best indie publisher track records in the industry. It's just they hit a real like couple of years of like so I'm really rooting for them to turn it around, because like Outer Wilds, like come on, like oh my god, they've got an eye. But I don't know what's happening inside of Annapurna. I do kind of feel like they felt like they had like now this is all totally like my like armchair like total like outsider guesstimates here, but like I feel like they had a model and they felt like it was working, and then it stopped working for a bit, and maybe it took a little time for them to like turn that ship.
But there was a little bit of a slow crawl towards this, because I remember we were talking about Sayonara Wild Hearts. We went, why did they pay for Queen Latifah to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, what did that add? And then several years later, 12 Minutes has full voice actors by people you've heard of. And it's like,
and so did oh geez. Well, like Maquette had like what was her name? Like big name Hollywood voice actors. That was another part of their model. That's the one thing that this game doesn't do that's out of that, like from the Annapurna playbook. They poured on the money, and I think probably paid for this incredible art direction and art. Like this is a game that requires a lot of art, because every character has multiple poses and expressions that can happen in different scenes. There's a lot of art involved here, probably very expensive.
I had to stop the transcribing I was running because it was making the game run slow. And I was like, oh, didn't expect that for a puzzle game. Pause transcription.
Yeah, it's very impressive art. And I feel like that must have been expensive. And so Annapurna probably poured on the money to make that happen. But, this isn't a game with any voice acting, so there was nowhere for Queen Latifah to go in this. They couldn't hire like, I don't know, Daisy Ridley to like come in and do the
Bryce Dallas Howard did Maquette.
Thank you. I was thinking Daisy Ridley for some reason, but whoever.
Daisy Ridley did something else. So
was it 12 minutes? Maybe she did 12 minutes. I forget. Doesn't matter. They can't get in
12 visits with Willem Dafoe and James McAvoy.
Willem Dafoe, right? They got Willem Dafoe for that freaking turd. Oh my god.
Hey, we love a paycheck for our friends in Hollywood, I guess.
Well, like Willem Dafoe needs another paycheck. Like that that man is I'm sure he's fine. But he also won't ever turn down a paycheck, apparently. So but yeah, so like this concludes the Raygan is baffled at Annapurna's business decisions section of the podcast. This is, I think, a real mid for Annapurna, but also I'm glad to see this thing finally come out. Like this is something that I had heard about back in the day, and probably like most of the gaming public, I had completely forgotten existed. This predates the Short Game Podcast by 2 years. So like, wow. We've been around a while, I thought, but like this has been kicking around for 15 years or something almost. So cool to see it finally come out, and cool to see it come out in a really polished form. I think this would be a really great addition to one of the like if Netflix paid to add this to their mobile game catalog, I'd be like, great choice, smart.
Yes.
I think this is the kind of game that like their audience would appreciate. I think it's very accessible. I think almost anybody would enjoy and appreciate this game. It would work super well on mobile.
Since there's no continuity, it's good for like snacking.
Yes.
Little snackable pieces.
Oh yeah, perfect. But this is also a game that's $15 on Steam and Switch. That's the launch platforms, and I don't think it's coming out on anything else at launch. I think it's just
not that I know of.
It's like a $15 is not like a AAA indie price tag, but it's also it's not like a $4 or 99-cent mobile app or whatever.
I don't know if I would have wanted this game to be less polished visually and cheaper.
No, like I think the 99-cent version of this thing that has the 2012 art would have been a real turnoff.
No, I'm not saying an 99-cent version.
Yeah.
And I also really believe that people should be paid for their work.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm also, don't get me wrong, like I'm not complaining about the $15 price tag, which I think is pretty reasonable, especially considering how gorgeous this game is.
It is lovely. It's more like we've played some games that are $15 and are like, oh my God, everyone open that wallet and throw money at these people. And I think that's
whereas this, I'm like, not bad. Wait for a sale, maybe. I don't know. Like, and it's sort of where I land on it. I think this is a really impressive and solid game that I'm really glad it came out, and I'm glad folks will finally get a chance to play it.
The engine is solid.
Yes. And I think if they decided to expand on this, like I guarantee you they prototyped 1,200 different stories for this, and probably have, dozens of them that didn't make the initial cut. I keep seeing them
in the press kit and on the web. I'm like, that wasn't in the game.
Wasn't in there.
So I know they exist somewhere.
Yeah. So like they could easily drop more of these on you if that was, if that's part of their plan. I don't really know. But like, I think it's a really nice, solid game that
It does feel like a season passy game.
It does, yeah. I feel like this would be a really great game to be included in one of these game catalogs, like, Game Pass or Netflix's thing or whatever. But as it is, it just sort of, I don't know, like I feel like it's kind of a yes-ish if you're really into it kind of thing for me. And
I believe they've sunsetted the demo, so...
Yeah. The demo delisted on Steam, which I think makes sense. Although I'm a little sad because from what I gathered, I think the demo included some unique stories. Maybe they'll bring those back as a unlock.
Maybe they're behind the curtain.
Maybe. And if they are, gosh, I hope we figure out that dang end of game puzzle and see. Maybe once we get past that, it's like, oh, here's the 1,200 additional stories that you were talking about, and I'll play this game till the end of time. But I doubt it.
A creator and all kinds of stuff. I mean, again, I don't need endless content to be happy with a game. It's just
short game.
Yeah, I would love a short game. It just feels like there was a lot of potential, and I
feel like it just did. It felt like 12 levels, almost 10 of which could have been treated essentially as tutorial. And by the time I really felt like I have a really good grasp of how this system works, and I'm sort of thinking, multiple panels ahead and kind of developing little internal strategies. And by the time my brain clicked with that, I didn't have very many puzzles left to do. So I would have liked if I had hit some. Honestly, I think I could have brought in some of these more complex. For example, it went from like 3-panel puzzles to like 8-panel puzzles by the end. I would have liked it to make that shift earlier and give you more complex challenges earlier on, rather than making it longer, although I would accept that too. Anyway, is there anything else to say about Storyteller?
No.
Okay.
Not that I think of.
Again, I think this game is totally worth checking out. But I would give it a sort of a reserved thumbs up. I would say this is a really, really artistically beautiful game, worth playing. And I I think, if you've got the $15 burning a hole in your pocket, go spend it on the Switch or Steam store. I played it, by the way, on the Steam Deck, and this is a game that works well with a touchscreen if you happen to play it that way. But also, works with a controller, works on a mouse and keyboard really nicely.
Framed was on a tablet. Sorry, I will not. I will drop my Framed love, but I do like
Framed. Framed is great. If you want something that's sort of in this vein, the Framed collection came out a couple of years ago that combines Framed 1 and Framed 2.
It is very less sandboxy.
Yeah, that's true, but it's still quite nice. Mm-hmm. So I would check that out. Worth checking this game out, by the way. I would check both of these out if you like this sort of comic story building sort of thing. And I think this is maybe the best example of that has existed. I think this is a slightly better game than Framed, in my opinion. But overall, I would say if you can, I bet this hits something like Netflix, or it comes out on iOS, or becomes part of Game Pass or something like that. I would be surprised if Annapurna doesn't go that route with this eventually. So this might be one to wait and see on. I don't think everyone needs to rush out and play this day one unless they're particularly compelled by the development story here. The wanting to play this thing that's been waiting to come out. If you've waited this long, is what I'm saying. Maybe wait a little longer, or not. It's fun. Sorry, I feel like I'm really going back and forth a lot here. I liked it. I liked this game a lot.
That's really fair. I also wanted to say, if you had a completely different game that's even older, that's comics themed, Comic Jumper from 2010 from Xbox Arcade, from the makers of Explosion Man.
I've never even heard of Comic Jumper. What is that?
So, have I talked about Explosion Man before?
Yes, I think, but it's been a long time.
That game was from maybe 2008. I moved to Seattle, met people with Xboxes, and they were like, I love this game, Explosion Man. And then we waited for their next thing to come out, and I went to PAX. And they did a story called Comic Jumper about it's like a 2.5D game where you're like reordering parts of the gameplay, and you're like platforming through a comic. So you're like reordering comic panels and platforming your way through.
That's pretty cool. I wonder if that still exists. Like a lot of these early Xbox like arcade, or early Xbox indies, like did they ever make it off the original Xbox 360? I actually don't know. I'm gonna search Steam and see if that game still exists.
The really fun part about it was like you went through different kinds of comics as you played. So like you went through the manga level. Like it was kind of like an art demo in some ways, but I had fun with it. But that game may not exist anymore. So
yeah, Xbox 360 only. Although I don't know of any reason that you wouldn't be able to still go out and download this. Maybe it runs on the Xbox One, but I don't know. Dust off your Xbox 360.
It's real fourth wall breaking, and like that real like weird like. I'm not a Rick and Morty fan, but like people who like Rick and Morty would love this game.
I've never heard of this.
Again,
so
welcome to me recommending a game you can't play.
Yeah.
This is normally Raygan and Shane in Nate's territory.
Yeah, I'm usually like, hey, you should check out this 3DS game that now that the store is closed, then you really need to go check out this game you can't buy anymore. But yeah, cool. So thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. Laura, do you have a little time for what's making us happy this week, do you think?
I do.
I do too. Laura, what's making you happy this week?
Well, besides the fact that my favorite TV show no one can watch without a VPN, The Mole Belgium is back. I will not talk about The Mole Belgium again.
Listeners, I don't know if you probably have to go search our show notes page to find Laura talking about The Mole Belgium. I don't remember when, but I do feel like this is something that Laura has talked about maybe multiple times. But Laura, what is The Mole Belgium?
I make references to it just because I find it very inexplicable that I kind of, we all did things that we feel a little ashamed about during the pandemic. And I went and hunted down all the previous versions of the TV show The Mole.
I feel like that particular sentence could have gone wildly off the rails at any point between before the word TV show.
Yeah.
We all did things we're not proud of. I went and hunted down Belgians.
I don't regret it. It's a and then I found on some like places where people talk about reality TV show, people were like, I mean, The Mole's good, but the best reality TV show ever is The Mole Belgium. And I was like,
it's not The Mole unless you get it from the Mole region of France or whatever, right? Otherwise it's just a sparkling reality TV.
So Justin's new trick is we very rarely meet new people, but when we do and they talk about reality shows, he'll be like, Laura should talk about her reality show. And then he ditches. And then it's like,
we rarely meet new people, but when we do, Laura talks about The Mole Belgium, and then we never meet them again.
I don't want to because it sounds. Anyway, it's an extraordinarily good show, but you have to find it, and then you have to find subtitles in English.
Okay.
So there's some barriers, but you can. But you can VPN and use, at the point where you're like using Whisper AI to generate subtitles so you can watch the program. You're like, what am I doing with my life?
At this point, I think if you're interested, the only solution is just to reach out to Laura privately and she will explain this to you.
I'll hook you up with it's a really good show, everybody.
I'm sure I believe you, but I will never find out.
No, you will never find out. It's kind of like when I started talking about how much I liked The Genius, the Korean TV show, and you were all like, that's also cool, Laura. Please watch a show in English that's available on Netflix.
I appreciate you, Laura. Yes, I'm sure you do.
Anyway, that's not what was making me happy this week. This is just digression day.
This was just happens. A tribute. Go ahead.
Raygan doesn't normally get a chance to make fun of someone else for a really esoteric, indecipherable hobby. But when it does, it's me. And
no one is allowed to make fun of me for anime ever again, is my point here. I'm not going out and finding Belgian reality TV and creating my own AI-generated subtitles. It is so
popular in Belgium that, like, literally they broke, like, half the country tried to sign up for the next season auditions overnight. Like, it is ludicrously popular.
I don't know what half the country is in Belgium, but what is that, 50 people?
If there's anyone in Belgium, like, go yell at Raygan.
Apologies.
Anyway.
Yes.
The thing that's actually making me happy is pretty highbrow, weirdly. Sometimes I add books to my Libby, which is the app I use to check out library books. And I put stuff on hold, and I'm very much like, I would like to be the person that reads this book someday. And then I'll read it later. And I procrastinate for 2 weeks and 2 weeks and 2 weeks. I finally stopped doing that, and I've read for the first time the book Never Let Me Go by Ishiguro. It has a Pulitzer. Everyone read it before this game we covered was in development. It is so lovely. It is a beautiful book. How are you like? There was a movie of it. Have you heard of this book, Raygan?
I feel like I've heard the name, but I don't remember any details about it. So count me as a no.
Yeah. So it's from 2005. It is about. I don't know if he won the Pulitzer for this, but he has a Pulitzer. So I'm not going to fact check live on the call. But the idea is it's kind of an alternate history where spoilers if you don't want to know anything. These kids are being raised, and they're talking about like they're going to become donors and carers, and they're like when they hit the fourth nation, they will be complete. Over time, you realize like they are the clones of people.
Oh, I think there was a movie made of this, right?
It was.
Yeah,
it's actually lovely. Underrated movie, but I had seen the movie a while ago and loved it and cried buckets. And I am actually reading the book now, and it's really delicate and kind, but also about like the petty, like it's about the kind of little things that as a kid are huge deals. Like you called someone out in a lie in front of a friend, and then they hate you for a year. And it's one of the few books that make like a little thing like that feel as intense as it does when you're 12. It is beautiful for the adult relationship stuff. It is beautiful for like the sci-fi stuff, but a lot of it's about like how mean people can be to each other as kids, and also how loving. It's kind of about like, can clones have souls, but also can children? Unclear.
I can answer that. Actually, I'm not sure I can, but it's complicated.
So very highbrow thing. But it's an easy read. Like,
Nice.
I thought it was going to be very highfalutin and very difficult and very literary, but it's just like short, snappy, simple sentences put together beautifully. Not what I was expecting at all.
I also have a book recommendation this week of a sort. I am actually almost done with a reread of the entire, and by reread, I mean I'm going through the audiobooks because that's the kind of brain I have, but listen of the entire Murderbot Diaries series.
Oh yeah, you've recommended those before.
Yeah. Have you read them? I forget.
I haven't, no.
Okay. A second recommendation then, Laura. So I really recommend these books. They're great science fiction with a great central character. They're from an author named Martha Wells, who apparently has like a long career of writing fantasy novels and other stuff. And her career was on a kind of a downswing. And then she created this character, Murderbot. Murderbot Diaries is a science fiction series that's made up. There's actually quite a lot of books in it now, but most of them are kind of novella length and so there's like the first 4 novellas kind of combine into a single story that's roughly kind of like one long novel, and then there's another novel, like a full length novel, one extra novella, and then there's a new full length novel coming out later this year. And that's why I was doing the reread. I was excited that there's a new Murderbot novel coming out. But the first one is called All Systems Red, Artificial Condition Rogue Protocol. If I'm honest, I don't think she's doing a great job with the titles here. They sound like Tom Clancy titles, right?
No, Tom Clancy makes a lot of money, so
I'm sure he does. But the Murderbot Diaries are about this. So the science fiction setting, far future, takes place mostly in and around a part of space called the Corporation Rim, where everything is a total corporate dystopia, and people live under the thumb of a corporation, and you get the idea. Mm-hmm. But the main character, who calls himself, although his name is private, he doesn't tell this to anyone, he calls himself Murderbot. He is a sec unit, which is a sort of robot with organic components. So essentially like a cloned human body with large amounts of tech inside it, sort of. Mm-hmm. Whose whole job is to protect people. He's like rented out and protects people while they're doing things like survey missions on planets, and has a governor module in his head that completely removes his free will, and he's like essentially like a slave to a computer system. And I mean, he's a robot himself, thinks like a robot, but sort of enslaved. But the first novel begins with him having, at some point in the recent past, hacked his governor module and figured out how to. Suddenly, he has free will, but he's mostly using that free will to slack off on his job and watch television serials while he should be working. He doesn't want to get destroyed. He just sort of wants to like skate through and try to avoid a terrible fate. Mm-hmm. But then the series is all about him sort of finding like found family. There's some incredible characters. The first book is great. He happens to be on a survey mission with some people from outside the corporation rim, and the story of him sort of learning about his own personhood. Some people read the series as like an Asperger's allegory, because his outlook is very like, he hates humans. He doesn't like to be touched. He doesn't like to talk to people. He doesn't like looking people in the eye. It makes him uncomfortable. He's like Murderbot is a bundle of like neuroses and anxiety, but he's also a ruthless killing machine. Mm-hmm. Like the first line of the book is, "As a heartless killing machine, I was a complete failure." And he's a great character. He's immediately likable. And then the world that it builds out is fun. There's some great side characters. I think it's the second or third one. He has a close friend who is like an AI built into a ship called ART, that stands for, he names him ART, stands for Asshole Research Transport. And like, just sort of very adventurous, fun sci-fi stories. Great characters, but honestly, it's mostly just down to Murderbot being like an incredibly lovable central character. And I really, really recommend these books to people. It's easy to like be put off by it's like something about the I don't think she does titles very well. The name Murderbot gives you an image that's like it's his ironic name for himself. Like when he was, this is all like first few chapters of the first little bit of the first book, so I don't think I'm giving anything away. Like he was responsible for a bunch of human deaths, and he feels really conflicted about it. And this was before he hacked his governor module. And so then he suddenly has free will, and he calls himself Murderbot, but it's actually sort of a ironic thing. And so like you might have a weird impression of this thing as being called the Murderbot Diaries, and with titles like All Systems Red and Rogue Protocol, but like they're really just very fun, funny, breezy sci-fi that, delves occasionally into like, what is a person, but not, it's just mostly just fun. So I really recommend these things. They're fun. They're quick reads. I like the audiobook versions. They're all read by like Kevin Free, I think is his name, who does a really great job. So highly recommend them. And I cannot wait for book 7, System Collapse, which is coming out later this year. And apparently she's signed on to do book 8 and book 9, and she has sold the TV rights to Amazon. So yes. I really hope that happens. I really, really hope that happens. It'd be such a good show.
I mean, Poker Face has cemented that hangout shows are really where it's at. Like, give me a good lead character, and you just want to see him do stuff. And like, hangout books is a genre that I claim a lot of Golden Age detective stories are hangout books. What's Poirot gonna do next? Like, yeah. I'm into Murderbot doing stuff. Like, that sounds great. I think I had been I sometimes have tone issues sometimes with like some of the sci-fi that is very referential. And I think I had misclassified Murderbot in my brain as one of those, like, not Jasper Fforde, but like close to it. The really self-referential, like sci-fi references in the sci-fi books. So I'm really glad to know that's not what this actually is.
Oh yeah, no, it's just mostly like, I just think straight up fun and highly award winning. I think the first book won like the Hugo Award and a Nebula Award. It won a lot of awards and really turned Martha Wells' career around. And obviously she's been cranking these things out, and I will take them, man. Just give me more Murderbot.
My apologies to Murderbot for misclassifying you. And my apologies to you, Raygan, for not trusting your recommendation.
All right. Well, this is it for this week of The Short Game. Thank you so much, listeners, for joining us this week. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net. That's our main homepage. But we also have set up a nice little jumping off page that gives you all the main links, and that is at shortgame.fm. So go to shortgame.fm. You will find links to my socials, to Laura's socials, all of the other co-hosts. Mm-hmm. You'll also find links to our Patreon. All of our patrons. First of all, thank you so much, patrons. We've had some very nice support from patrons recently. If you're a patron, thank you. And if you're not a patron, even just $1 a month gets you instant access to our Discord. What are you waiting for? Our Discord is where we chat about the games that we're playing, and we chat about the show, et cetera, et cetera. So join us there. Let's see. And also on that page, you'll find links to, obviously, our homepage. You'll find links to subscribe on the various podcast apps. If you're on a podcast app that supports the leaving of reviews, we really appreciate that. That's one of the things that helps people find the show, and especially the iTunes, or whatever they call it now, Apple Podcasts app. If you leave reviews there, that helps with the visibility of the show. And we haven't had one in, honestly, months. I think this is, one of those things people don't think to leave a review if you've been listening to a show for ages. If you are listening to my voice and you've listened to the show a little bit and you think it's a pretty good show and you haven't left a review on the podcast app of your choice, I know it's kind of a pain, but take a second and do it now. And we would really appreciate it. We do read those things, and also they help people find the show. So you can do that. Also, just, post about the show wherever you do posts. That's another way that people find the show, and we really, really appreciate that kind of support. And you can find, I mentioned that all the links are on shortgame.fm, but specifically you can find me on Mastodon. I'm Raygan, Raygan, at bird.rodeo. And Laura, where can people find you?
You can also find me at bird.rodeo, Laura J. Nash.
Right. And listeners, once again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.